everyone, and welcome to the Business Growth Pod. I'm your host, Allan Draper. I am very excited for our guest today. Today, I would like to welcome to the show Mike McFall. Mike is the co-founder and co-CEO of Bigby Coffee, one of the fastest growing coffee franchises in the United States. Mike is the author of Grind, which was published in 2019, and Grow, which was published this year, just recently released. These are the first two books in a three-book series, which offer practical advice for entrepreneurs looking to turn their business concepts into successful ventures. Welcome to the show, Mike. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Allan. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
So, I'm kind of in a place in my career where I'm thinking about writing a book. I'm so busy. I'm trying to just kind of put that on a priority list. What was it that kind of just was nagging at you to the point where you're like, hey, I'm not just going to write one book. I'm going to write a series of 3 books.
Well, it's a long story. I'll make it very brief. This project started with a professor at Michigan State University, and we set out to write the book. That relationship fizzled. I was kind of left with the project in my lap. And I realized that the project was enormous. And so I broke it up into 3 books as opposed to writing one book. I think at the end of the day, it gave me more focus and ultimately made the project, I think, better.
So with startup entrepreneurs in mind, folks that are, they're thinking about pulling the trigger, or they're in their first or maybe even second year. What is it about Grind? What are a couple of things from Grind that they absolutely have to know?
Well, one, I think you have to identify what your core product is. And, that seems simple, but I think a lot of people are off the mark on that. And I can use my company as an example. We started in the gourmet coffee business in the cafe space, and we were like everybody else. We were sort of this Italianized version of a cafe, meaning, we were traditional in our products, cappuccinos, lattes, campanas, macchiatos, so on and so forth. We quickly realized that everybody was buying flavored lattes. They were buying the lattes with chocolate and whipped cream and caramel and sprinkles on top. And so, we called them sweet bomb lattes, but we quickly realized that's what people are buying. And we got very focused on that earlier than anybody else. And I think it was one of the reasons why we were able to build our company successfully, quickly, the way we did. The other thing is the other thing is, but then you've got to, once you've figured out what your core product is, then I think you got to become world-class at delivering that specific product. And the bane of most entrepreneurs is they're unfocused and they're all over the place. And so staying laser-like focused on figuring out how to become world-class at delivering your core product is the primary message I would send to somebody early in their endeavor.
Yeah, I love that idea. This concept of figuring out your core product. I quote this, I did in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. He talks about a hedgehog concept. And I've mentioned it many times on the show before. And it's basically, if you can picture 3 circles, and in the middle of these 3 circles is your hedgehog concept, or you refer to it as your core product. And those 3 circles are: 1, what is something that you are very passionate about? 2, what drives your economic engine? And 3, what is something that you can be the best in the world at? And it's funny because you kind of mentioned 2 of those 3 things. Now, it kind of begs the question, right? So with Bigby, you guys sounds like you were quasi-testing the market. At least you were paying attention to the market, what was going on, and you adapted to it. At what point do you say, okay, 1, I realize that's what the market wants, but 2, we don't necessarily want to give that to them. That's not what we're doing. What if you run into that, Mike, as a company? You run into that scenario where you're like, hey, we have a mission and our mission is different than what the market wants. What is somebody to do there?
Yeah, I think it happens all the time. And, what I would say at that point is then you're going to struggle to generate revenue. And revenue generation is the number one hurdle that any entrepreneur faces when they start up, is generating the customers, generating the revenue. And if the marketplace doesn't want to buy it, you're just in for one long, slow slog that most people aren't gonna get through.
Yeah, I see this a lot with what I would call like a hobby type business, where it's somebody thinks there's they have a hobby or they enjoy doing something, and then they say, or their friends tell them, or their family tells them, hey, you should turn this into a business. And let's say they're really good at making cakes, or I'm really getting into fly fishing, and let's say I become a really good fly fisherman, and people say, oh, you should open a fly shop or become a guide. And it's like, there's a couple of issues there. One is, I don't know how to make that marketable. I don't know how to make a business out of that. And I own a lot of really boring businesses, Mike. So, we were talking pre-show. I own a pest control company. That's my largest business. It's in 8 states. I have 10 different locations. It's from, Long Island, New York to Reno, Nevada. And we do very well. And it surprises a lot of people. But then there are people that have like a restaurant, which restaurants are very difficult to do well with. And so I think a lot of times people, they try to combine, we talked about the Hedgehog Concept, this circle in the Venn diagram of something they're passionate about. Now, I think where people can miss the boat a little bit is it doesn't have to be the exact thing, right? I'm passionate about pest control. I love the industry. There's a lot of things that I really like about it. I'm not necessarily, I call myself a bug guy, but I'm not necessarily the bug guy. So if someone's trying to think of a concept, Mike, they have some skills, they have some talents. What is something that you would recommend that they do to kind of test the commercial viability of the idea and whether they can really scale it? You talk a lot. We're going to get to your new book, Grow, which was just released, I think, early June, right? First week of June, first or second week of June. And in there, you talk a lot about, you throw around the number $100 million, building a company to $100 million. How does somebody kind of test their ideas before they pull the trigger?
You can't. And I teach a class here at the University of Michigan in entrepreneurship, and it's one of the things that the guy I co-teach with and I talk about. People will come up to us all the time and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about that idea? Well, I'm a subset data point of 1. And the only way you can test your idea is to get it in the marketplace and see if people are willing to actually pull out their wallet and buy the product. And people don't tell you the truth. They'll tell you it's a great idea. They don't want to have the difficult conversation with you. Mm-hmm. If they don't like it, people won't tell you they don't like it for the most part. And so the only way you know is if somebody will pull out their wallet and pull the credit card out and put it in the machine and buy it. That's the only way you know. And so it's difficult. And I know everybody wants the security around a prediction on a product and whether a product's going to work. And, that's very, very difficult. And I think, frankly, impossible to before, especially if you're if you're starting a new, you've got a brand new idea. Now, if you're going into, there's a lot of businesses out there that you just enter a marketplace and you have some competitive advantage in terms of how you execute and so on. Well, that's different, right? You can, like the coffee business today, we got a pretty good idea. Most people have a pretty good idea that the consumer is going to buy some coffee, right? And there's some nuance in terms of how you do it, where you put it, and product, and so on and so forth. But I think that question is a very, very difficult question to answer.
I love your answer, though. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I think that today's entrepreneurs are like, 1860s, Wild Wild West people or whatever, the gunslingers, right? They're the people that were out on the front lines. They were exploring new frontiers and whatever. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they want the safety net. They want all the details. And that's interesting that you teach a class about entrepreneurship, because I feel like, it's clear that you're an entrepreneur first, Because I feel like the textbook answer would be develop a business plan, test the market for a year. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no.
go through this process.
I've got a great story about that. There's a gentleman in town who's a venture capitalist and quite successful at it. And he was telling me business plan, he doesn't even look at business plans. He doesn't even care. What he wants is a one sheet piece of paper that tells him how you're going to move product. How are you going to sell the product? And that's all he looks at, is because if you can tell me how you're going to generate revenue, then I'm interested. And if I believe in how you're telling me that you're going to generate revenue, then I'm interested. I don't care about anything else, right? I don't care about it's business plans are people put so much weight into them, right? And typically they're built for bankers and so on. I mean, all bankers need is they need something to stuff their file with to show that they did a little bit of work around the fact that they looked at the business. That's all they're for. And so what we focus on is get your product in the marketplace and see if people are willing to buy it. If they're willing to buy it, then you move forward and then you learn, because then you see what people are buying, you see their behaviors, you see how they respond to the product after it's in the marketplace, and then you can iterate and then you can improve it and move forward.
I think this is a great point, Mike. So the flexibility, the reassurance, the kind of safety net or whatever you're looking for, that backup should be in your ability to adapt to the marketplace. It should be in this, hey, this is what we're going to try, and we're going to get feedback and we're going to test it. And the interesting thing about this, Mike, is that this isn't just for startup entrepreneurs. This isn't just for somebody launching a brand new idea, of which I think there are very, very few, which, just something like that has never been created before. I think everybody has a competitor on some level. I think, if you mix two ideas, you're going to come up with whatever this third idea is that someone's claiming is new. But I think this principle applies also to us as seasoned entrepreneurs or people that have been in it a few years that are trying a new line of products, or they're going to add a department, or they're going to integrate vertically or whatever. I think there's a way that this same principle applies, where it's like, hey, you should find comfort in the idea, not that you're going to knock it out with the first swing. I look at it as me like stepping into a Major League Baseball game. I guarantee you that my first swing is not going out of the park if it even gets close to the baseball at all. But then I kind of adapt and change. And it's so important for entrepreneurs to know that. And I think the biggest reason why it's important is so that they actually pull the trigger. For people that just wait, it's like you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow, you're not going to see if it works, you're never going to know. And that's such an interesting issue. I wanted to change course here because you talked about something that's near and dear to my heart. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from this. And that's kind of the shiny object syndrome. You mentioned, and I know you talk about this in Grow also, this idea that in order to be hyper successful, you have to put everything that you've got into one idea, as opposed to, doing things, 4 or 5 things at once. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. And if I'm in front of a group and they ask me, hey, Mike, give me one word in terms of how you've been able to get the company to where it is today, my answer is always focus. My business partner and I, Bob Fish, we woke up every single day for 20 plus years focused on selling one more cup of coffee tomorrow than we did today. 20 years. And here's what entrepreneurs do. They get involved in a little bit of real estate, and then they invest in a franchise, and then they do. You are not, if you aren't giving 100% of your focus to your business and maximizing your productivity in that business every single day, it will always be middling. It'll always be middling. So we started, and I entered our company as a barista. We were selling at the first store. We had one store at that time. And we were selling under 300 cups of coffee a day. In fact, I remember the day we crossed 300 because I called Bob at midnight after we closed. I was like, we did it. We did. I think we sold 313 products or cups of coffee that day. Today, I don't know. It's well over 100,000 a day that we're selling.
That's
and it's
incredible.
because we woke up every single day focused on that one thing. We never, you know what it's like as you get successful. Everybody brings you opportunities. Everybody brings you ideas, things they want you to be involved in or sit on boards or and we did some of that. But frankly, I think in comparison, we did very little of that kind of thing. And we just focused on selling cups of coffee.
Yeah, I love this idea. And I think it's natural for the folks that are interested in starting businesses to understand this. Now, you're kind of, I'm like the poster child for distraction. Just to give you a little idea, I own a pest control company. I own a product company that was on Shark Tank. I own a credit monitoring agency, a digital marketing agency, a software company, several real estate companies. I have 2 podcasts. And a lot of people, they come to me. And by the way, what I'm saying is that what I'm getting to is that what Mike is saying is true. I have a lot of people that come to me and they're like, hey, Allan, I kind of want to be like you. I kind of want to have, some different stuff and invest in a bunch of different things. And I think for me, what worked, Mike, and now I don't have a single company that does 100 million in revenue. So I cannot speak to that. That you're on the podium alone for that. But I hyper focused for a certain number of years until my companies could not just sustain themselves without me, but could grow without me. But what you're saying is true, especially to the effect that when my companies, my very first, outside of real estate, my very first company was pest control. I actually moved from Phoenix, Arizona. I was practicing law, moved to Detroit with my young family, and our first branch was opened in Farmington Hills, Michigan. And I spent several years where that was the only thing I did. I didn't think about anything else, professionally speaking. I didn't think about anything else, me and my partner, my brother. And then I kind of branched off a few years ago and started doing some other things. Had I not done that, there's no way that my company would be where it is today. Had I not branched off, it would be further down the road. Exactly what Mike's saying. Although I live a different set of ideas, I don't disagree with you, Mike.
Well, so much of that is what you're trying to get out of a business too. So my end game, my moonshot, as we call it internally, is to own the Detroit Red Wings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And for me to own the Detroit Red Wings, I have to be a billionaire. And I believe there's one way to become a billionaire, and that's to build one really, really big company. And so that's what I'm doing. Now, I don't want to. That's my answer to how it should work and so on. But I think what I heard you say, which I think is super important for people to understand, is that you stayed in it and focused on it until you had it to the point where you believed you could step away and do something else. And that is a critical moment. And I think it's okay to step away. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't do that if your primary business is struggling. If your primary, you obviously can't step away. You've got to stay focused in it. So, I don't think our ideas are different. I think that, my intention is, and always has been, to grow I always wanted to grow a massive company, right? And we're in the midst of it. We're 27 years in and we've built a nice company. It's nowhere near massive at this point, but we're growing very, very rapidly, and things are, I don't know. It's like the Red Wings. Maybe the guy's got a chance.
That's all we can hope for, right? All we want is a chance. It's interesting that you say that because, I talked a little bit how I've started to fly fish, and I was talking fly fishing yesterday with some family. I was out on a lake with my brother, who's much better than I am. I'm trying to learn from quite a bit. Hopefully, he's not listening, because I'll never live that one down. But I told him, and we were catching quite a few fish, and we're catch and release mostly what I do. And I told him, you know what? I've been thinking about this over the last 6 months to a year, and I don't think I'm so drawn to fishing because I am, because of the idea of catching fish. I think I'm drawn to fishing because of the possibility to catch a fish. And it feels a lot like, my guess is I don't play the lottery, but that same thing. People get addicted to gambling. I think it's that same thing. It's chasing this, just going after this possibility. And for entrepreneurs that, like, you're going after the Red Wings, which, I mean, that it's so awesome to have perspective. And not only that, it's awesome to share it with people. A lot of times we feel like, oh no, people are going to laugh at me, or people are going to tell me it's impossible, or they're going to discourage me. It's awesome to just kind of have that possibility and work towards it. I think that's awesome. And that would be an incredible franchise to own, by the way.
I think that concept of it's the possibility is what's intriguing. And I'll tell you, no one, and I've been public about this. I was on the front page of the Detroit business section, the Detroit Free Press business section. And the headline was that I wanted to own the Red Wings, right? Which is a pretty bold thing to have printed about you in a newspaper like that. But the thing is I've never had anybody question me, not one time. And I think the reason is I think they know what I would say to them if they questioned me.
Well, what would you say to them?
Am I allowed to swear on this thing? Like, I mean, it would be F off, right? Like, come on, like,
yeah,
don't say that to me, and so like that is you got to tell people about your dreams. And oh my gosh, if somebody questioned me on that, like, I mean, they would no longer be in my circle. Like, I wouldn't even,
Yeah, that's so incredible, because we all have those people. And when there's an individual that's starting a business, there's a couple of things that I tell them. Number one, don't take advice from somebody that you wouldn't trade places with regarding that thing, right? And I wouldn't trade places with anybody. I love my life. Most people wouldn't. But what I mean is, if somebody is not in a better professional situation than you are, especially if you want to start a business, if the individual that's giving you business advice hasn't started a business or grown a business, then, and I'm not saying be rude, but okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I'll take it into consideration. And then listen to the people that are doing what you want to do, whether it's, with your physical health, with your family, spiritual life, financially. Don't take advice from broke people. Why would you do that? So when you run into people that, hey, that dream is ridiculous, that you're never going to do that. This is harsh. Get them out of your life.
Yeah, 100%.
And maybe you still have a relation. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a longtime friend where it's like, hey, I just want you to know I love you. I want a relationship with you. We're just not going to discuss this because you discouraged me or whatever, because your circle matters. I love how you said, Mike, I love how you said they won't be in my circle anymore. That's such a powerful statement, and it's so hard to do.
Yeah, it is. And I've been very fortunate to have my closest people be incredibly supportive of me. So, I have that advantage. My parents put me through, private school, private college, invested really heavily in my education. And at 24 years old, I was a barista in a coffee shop when, all my friends were in graduate school or starting at, some high profile brand and so on. And I was a barista in a coffee shop, and they never said a word. They never said a word. They let me do my thing. They let me tear into it. And they've always just, all they've ever done have been supportive of me, which, that's a gift. That's a gift. I hope that's what I can do for my kids.
Love it. We have just a couple of minutes left here, Mike. Why don't we talk a little bit about your new book? Just came out. You can get it on Amazon. I've read as much of it as I could find online, which is quite a bit. Amazon offers this sample, and I've devoured it. Let's talk about what's different between your first and second book. What does Grow kind of add to the narrative you're trying to get out there?
Well, it's meant to be linear. And so grind is for business startup. And from that moment you commit to a new business to your first day of positive cash flow. And then grow picks up in that bootstrapping entrepreneurial phase where you probably have, you feel comfortable that you're going to be able to build a business around what you've started. And it takes you from that bootstrapping moment through to becoming a powerful leader in the organization. But then even more importantly, it transitions you into what I call irrelevance. And so that's the arc that I take you on. And, so much of what we learned that made us successful as entrepreneurs is all the stuff that gets in the way of becoming a powerful leader. And so the book spends a lot of time talking about the things that we need to do as successful entrepreneurs to unwind ourselves, become more aware of who we are, and build yourself as a leader as opposed to a bootstrapping entrepreneur. And it's really, I've tried to capture, it's definitely different voices. And I've heard that. I've heard people tell me Grow is written in a very different voice than Grind, but it's also a totally different mentality. Startup is like, it's crazy. Like you wake up every day and it is, but the Grow phase is so much more about how you interact and treat people, how you build teams, how you approach the business is such a longer term perspective. There isn't this sense of urgency minute in, minute out once you've reached stability, is what we call it. And so, it is a very different voice, but it focuses in on what you need to do to become an effective leader and take your business from that moment of chaos, which is bootstrapping, to calm, which is when you become irrelevant.
Yeah, that's so interesting, that point that in order to grow your company, you have to become, I say this a lot, that you have to become the type of person that matches that level of growth. I say that you won't find a founder or a CEO, the person in charge, that they're personally at a level much, several tiers below that of their company. It just doesn't happen. And if it does, that relationship doesn't last long. I think another thing that's really important is that you talked about how the individual needs to grow and how the individual needs to treat people better. In order to scale a company, you have to have people along for the ride. You have to have people that are bought in with your vision and your dream. Otherwise, it's really tough to scale, because one of the main components of scaling a company is you have to continually replace yourself. You can't be, grinding the coffee if you want a $100 million coffee company. It's not that you're above that. It's that, you have to be doing other things in order for the company to scale.
Yeah. And I think probably the biggest challenge is that as you grow as a leader and as the company grows, you have to determine day in and day out who you need to be as the leader in any given moment in time. You can be deep into the grow phase, but you might switch back into, the maniacal grind phase in a period of time or in a moment in time, because you feel that that's what the company needs from you. And so you have to, it's one of the hardest things in relation to leadership is knowing what your people and what your organization need from you at a particular moment in time, and then providing that. And so, yeah, do I switch back occasionally? Not so much anymore, but do I switch back into sort of a micromanager maniacal? Typically today it's to make points. Like I want to make a point around something, so I will do that. But that's the hardest thing. Now, eventually you get to the point where you're never having to do that, or hopefully you're never having to do that. But that is, to me, understanding who you need to be in relation to your organization is the biggest challenge to grow into becoming an effective leader.
That's incredible, because we kind of started the conversation talking about finding this product or service market fit, right? You talked about how you pivoted once you found out that your customers were buying the same drink over and over. And it's like, it just made me realize that your company needs to provide what your customers want, right? So you have to adjust the company to the customers, and the leaders need to adjust themselves to the people that they're leading.
Yeah.
In order to scale it.
Yeah. It's exactly it.
Incredible. Mike, where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you're doing, they want to buy your books, they want to scale their companies?
Yeah, with the second book, I launched a website that is in relation to my work with the books and so on. And that's michaeljmcfall.com. That has links to all my social media channels, and you can buy the book there. And then there's a fair amount of content in there that isn't anywhere else in the world, in an area called the classroom.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time, Mike. Best of luck in the future. Look forward to staying in contact with you.
Great. Thanks, Allan. Appreciate it.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.